All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, Welcome everybody to the basically our first webinar with the DEI committee of the NSA. My name is Ty Calhoun. My pronouns are he, him. I live in Dallas, Texas currently. I'm a PhD student. I also work full time. So pretty busy guy, but I'm very excited to be a part of this committee and kind of be a part of the first iteration of this committee within the NSA. So thanks everybody for being here. Um, the title of this webinar is called When Culture and Stuttering Collide. And basically, we just want to talk about, we want to start by talking about what the DEI committee is, what it means to me and other people within this committee and also in tonight's webinar, and just talk about what we plan to achieve and what DEI means to everybody within the NSA. So I'll start by talking about the DEI committee. What we aim to achieve is to, in a very simple way, just diversify the NSA. We already know that the NSA itself is pretty diverse. There's people of different ethnicities, religion, sexual orientations, just all types of different backgrounds are within the NSA. But maybe not everybody in the NSA kind of has like a broader awareness of each kind of person within the NSA. And so what we want to do is kind of bridge the gap in understanding between different people within the NSA. So we want to make sure that everybody feels that they're understood fully within the NSA, that there's no potential bias, there's no misunderstandings between different groups within the NSA. We're all one big stuttering family, but within that family, there's different people who have different tastes, different backgrounds, different whatever. So we just want to make sure that within the NSA, everybody feels included, heard, welcome, and excited to be a part of the broader NSA as a whole. Um, so I'll start by talking about what DEI means to me personally. DEI to me is very important. I've said publicly and privately with friends and family and whatnot that I want to live every day of my life showing up as my authentic self. And I think that's really important for everybody to live their full authentic self each and every day. Because if you're not living your truth every day, then you're not really living your life for you, you're living your life for other people. And it's important that you wake up every day and look in the mirror and love what you see. And personally, I love what I see every day in the morning. So I want that for everybody. I'm going to read from the University of Iowa. They kind of I feel like they had a good definition of what DEI means, and I kind of apply it to what DEI means to me personally. So, in short, they said diversity refers to all aspects of human difference, social identities, and social group differences, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, creed, color, sex, gender identity, sexual identity, um, and a bunch of other different identities and preferences. To me, it's important that we understand that within the NSA, as I said before, there's people of all sorts of different backgrounds, people you may not even, people from backgrounds you may not even know about or have ever heard about. But it's important that we be aware of that so that we can create a cultural awareness within the NSA so nobody feels left out. Equity, the University of Iowa said, equity refers to fair and just practices and policies that ensure all campus community members can thrive. That's important to me because within the NSA, it's important that everybody feels that they have a place. For me personally, I'm somebody who is a covert stutterer. If anybody doesn't know what that is, it basically just means my stutter it's not always constant. So sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. But beyond just stuttering, it's important that everybody feels welcome within the NSA and that everybody feels that they have an equal opportunity to participate in webinars, in the conference, and just making their voices heard to anybody within the NSA. And then lastly, for inclusion, they say inclusion refers to a campus community where all members are and feel respected, have a sense of belonging, and are able to participate and achieve their potential. I feel like that's the whole point of the NSA as a whole, as it is. We want people who stutter to feel like they have a place in society and a network of people that they can go to for support. Inclusion to me means everything because as somebody who is Black and queer and disabled, without inclusion, people like myself really wouldn't have a place in society. It took people way before me to fight for me to have a seat at the table. And that's why this committee is so important to me, because the DEI committee within the NSA allows me to have a seat at the table and kind of maybe direct some policy and some decision making within the NSA to make sure that everybody feels welcome within the NSA, regardless of any of the backgrounds they might come from. I also feel it's important to show people within the NSA who may look or think like me that it's important to see yourself represented within society, within the NSA, within basically anywhere you go. It's important to see yourself represented. I know for me personally, growing up as a young queer kid, a Black young queer kid, I really didn't see anybody I could look up to in media, popular media, who was Black and openly queer. I'm so happy now that kids these days coming up in the later generations have the opportunity to come up, growing up, seeing so many more openly queer people closer to their age, show the younger generations that you can be queer, you can be Black, you can be whatever, and be successful and have a career and be happy and experience joy. I feel like that's so needed today because I feel like there's a lot going on in the world right now. And when we can see ourselves represented fully and see people that look like you and talk like you, see those people be respected and loved and revered, it really does make a huge difference. It's made a difference for me in my past, and I know it'll make a difference for people coming up after us. So I'm going to move on to the first topic of our webinar. I'm going to open it up to anybody who wants to speak, and just the question will be, what does DEI mean to you personally, and what do you think its purpose is? Oh, Lindsay?
Hello. Okay, let me decide to lower my hand. There we go. Okay. Um, so I feel like what DEI means to me as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion. Feel that that topic is a common topic amongst our academia, um, our employment, um, and having the knowledge and um, being able to be open-minded to the possibility of incorporating a diverse population meaning from different racial backgrounds, different beliefs, spiritual beliefs, different upbringings, different neighborhoods. I feel like that portion of diversity is able to lend its hand with being able to bring different experiences to the table. If we all had the same people that grew up in the same neighborhood, that went to the same school. We wouldn't get the richness that comes with being able to have a diverse background. You learn new things, you're exposed to different things, you're able to expand your horizon. Um, kind of, having a narrow view of your own personal world and being able to open up that view more. As far as equity, I feel like um, everybody needs to have the same opportunities as everybody else. So, depending on their background, their financial state, their upbringing, affects their opportunities of what they are able to obtain in life. So, not only a personal motivation to obtain your goals or do what you need to do, but being able to have those resources afforded to you if you don't know, like, the way to go, like the proper path to take. So having, the knowledge and the resources afforded to people to have a broader understanding, to be able to get to the different opportunities that we have. So equity to me feels like having the same resources that another person has, and whatever that looks like. As far as being inclusive means a sense of belonging. So having an inclusive environment, not only, being in a community that stutters, that is the main thing that is able to bring everybody together. That, to have that sense of belonging to a community, that they understand where I'm coming from. They understand the silent moments that I've had. They've understood the triumphs and the challenges that I've had throughout my life, to somebody that understands and gets it. That is something to feel included about. But also it extends beyond the stutter. And it's like, is there a lady out there that looks like me? Is there somebody that stutters that's in a leadership position like I am? How do they deal with their challenges? So having a representative that looks like me to look up to is also important to me, to feel more inclusive about my individuality. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Lindsay. Yeah, I'll echo what you said. I mean, it's definitely important to see yourself represented in society, in your workplace, wherever you may be, because um, it really does give you the confidence to know that somebody like you, who talks like you, who looks like you, can do it. That they've done it and succeeded. That means you can do it too. And also, like you said about everybody having the same opportunities, I also think that's very important. You know, people come up through different circumstances in their lives. Some people are richer than others. Some people just have more education than others. There's not too much we can do about that, except to make sure that everybody, regardless of your background, has the same opportunity, to make sure that the same doors open for everybody, regardless of your background. Because I always kind of think that as long as the door is open for everybody, regardless of where you come from, as long as you work hard, you can achieve that. So I definitely like what you said about everybody having equal opportunities, because it really does make a huge difference in people's outcomes and their confidence levels growing up. Does anybody else have anything to say about what DEI means to them?
I just want to expand on what you, Ty, said and Lindsay said, and I want to relate it to the NSA's mission statement that, if you stutter, you're not alone. So the DE when we think about the DEI committee, the purpose of the purpose of us is to make sure that we see the person like not just for their stuttering, but also person behind their stuttering. So that includes their economic background, race, sex, gender identity. So it includes a lot of facets of a person that's not just about stuttering. So I think what DEI means to me is for us to for people of marginalized communities to not just have a seat at the table, but to have like an opinion within the stuttering community that really matters. And I believe the DEI committee is like the vessel that will help like bolster that just the uh, resources that are able to be accessed by these marginalized communities. Yeah, and I just wanted to share that I was really inspired from uh, this past conference in Fort Lauderdale because I went to my first workshop that I believe was hosted by Angela Medina, and I'm forgetting names, but she was one of the hosts, and that was my introduction to even like knowing that there is a DEI committee within the NSA. And then once I knew about that, I was like, I need to be part of this somehow. So it's I think it's really great that the NSA is really um, uh, making a space for marginalized communities within the stuttering community because it's very much needed. Yeah, and that's what I would like to share.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Matt. Um, yeah, I agree with everything you just said. Um, it's one thing to have an open seat at the table. It's one thing to actually have a voice at the table. And so that's why I'm very happy and lucky to be a part of the DEI committee along with you and our other co-members, just to make sure that we are providing a voice for people who come from those marginalized backgrounds, making sure that we do and the people in the NSA community from those backgrounds do have a voice and can hopefully affect some policy and some guidance moving forward for the NSA as a whole. If anybody else want to share anything? It's okay if not. Oh, okay.
I can share a little bit. For me, diversity became important as part of my work. I'm a speech pathologist, and the fields of speech pathology and audiology are very, very white female and don't represent the population of people that we serve. So that got me interested in becoming a part of our DEI. Well, actually, we founded a DEI task force, and talking about equity. The first thing we did was try to identify why is this field not attractive to people from diverse populations, or why are we not even getting people to apply? So identifying the barriers, so the equity issue, what are the barriers that we've put up, maybe not even knowing that we put them up. So we have first generation student scholarships, underrepresented student scholarships, And because there are so many factors that go into what are your opportunities going to be, and there is a lot of inequity. So it's just been really important to me to try to say we're going to level that playing field for everyone, because it is a much richer place with diversity. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm for anything that helps people feel, create a culture of belonging, and yeah, just make it better. Oh, I've got a chat. Let's see. Yes. Does this ever come up at ASHA? There is a whole there's a whole special interest group on cultural diversity, and they do have a lot of you mean the ASHA convention, I guess. Well, ASHA itself has a special interest group, and then at the ASHA conference that'll be this month, actually next week, came up really fast. There'll be a whole division of being culturally the word's not competent anymore. What's the better word? Culturally responsive. And understanding how to serve people from different cultures and do it in a respectful and aware manner. And things to look for that are different in the language or the speech, that just to be aware of that would be a normal thing for different cultures. So yes. As far as the lack of diversity in the field, I don't know what they're doing about that. I'm not sure that they're doing much, but I'll look into that.
Thank you for sharing, Julie.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely like what you said about how we learn from people from different backgrounds. I know for me personally, I've learned so much from people who don't look like me, talk like me, act like me. I mean, I feel like you really don't grow as a person unless you kind of move away from your comfort zone, away from your like known community. It's good to be able to talk to people of different backgrounds, because that's how you learn about different people's cultures, their backgrounds, how they live, how they talk. Um, yeah, so I think that's very important. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I think if nobody has anything else to
I can
say, oh sure.
First of all, thanks everyone for coming. I definitely feel like very honored and excited to be on this committee. It definitely is not something that I maybe would have thought of when I first joined the NSA in like 2019, 2018. But I'm so happy and excited that obviously it's gotten to this point. I think an important part of the DEI committee for me, sort of a committee that, is working to advance those values, is, that it really is like a mouthpiece, a sort of people in the NSA community. I know that we want to be like responsive, and we really want to represent like, what people's concerns are, and also, positives as well. I really enjoyed at the last conference, there was a think tank, I think Matt talked about it maybe with Angela. And, that was just such a productive discussion. I feel like there were so many really like insightful comments. Even I remember one man getting up and talking about how, he was a military veteran and how he really wanted more support within the NSA for, people who had that experience, especially being a person who stutters. And I really had never thought of that at all. So that really like widened my own perspective. And so I feel like I'm excited to learn on this committee while also, working to make the NSA more inclusive. And I'm also excited the next conference is in St. Louis. I think it's a really good opportunity to sort of maybe reach, a different community in the Midwest and also more urban community. I know it's close to Chicago. And so, so I'm excited.
Thanks for sharing that. It's a little unfortunate. I moved from St. Louis almost a year ago. So it's a little tragic that I'm not living in St. Louis anymore. Now that the conference is going to be there next year, but I'm going to try to go back and make it. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anybody else who wants to speak to this first topic? All right, if not, that's completely fine. I think we'll move on to the second topic, and I'll let Julie take over this part.
Let me turn on my microphone. So this kind of relates to the title of the webinar. And we were curious about or wanted to discuss how, now I want my notes. Now that I'm on the spot, I'm nervous. I want my notes. How culture affects how you view your stuttering. Does it affect how does your family, how does your family view your stuttering, and does that have any kind of positive or negative impact? And does it affect your interactions when you see extended family, like over the holidays? And I know Matt was going to share a little bit. Did I ask the question correctly, committee members?
Yes, Julie, I think you did great. Yeah. I could go ahead and pick up the topic about how one's culture affects how their stuttering is perceived. So just a little background about myself. I am a second generation Filipino. And my parents immigrated from the Philippines in the 80s when they were both in their 20s. So growing up, it was for me, it was a mishmash of both Eastern influence and Western influence. I was born and raised in the Bay Area in California, where the culture there was, it couldn't be more different than how the culture was in the Philippines, where my parents immigrated from. So I wanted to talk more specifically about how coming from an Eastern culture, so that includes cultures from Asia and the Middle East, and how that affected my perception of my own stuttering. So, and I believe this is an important thing to talk about within the DEI space, just because knowing about other people's cultures and how that affects their view of stuttering is a very important part about, like practicing cultural humility, like being able to, even though you don't understand someone else's culture, being open to listening to them is a really important start. With my story about stuttering, growing up in a Filipino household, it was very interesting. I grew up as a covert stutterer. So, just like Ty mentioned, I, I, I was able to mask stuttering quite a bit. And that was either through avoidance techniques or being able to substitute words. And in in hindsight, I do think a lot of the way I approached my own stuttering was due to the cultural influences that I kind of was around in my household. So, um, in a lot of Eastern cultures, um, we have a collectivist mindset. So when comparing that to Western cultures, so that includes um, cultures from North and South America, uh, and Europe. Uh, they follow more of an individualistic culture where one is more encouraged to express themselves freely, be more creative, express how they're feeling. So growing up in my Filipino household, um, being able to express yourself and being vulnerable with your own feelings was never really something that was taught to me. So, and as a person who stutters, for a lot of people who stutter, we tend to internalize a lot of emotions, when we think about the iceberg, right? Yeah, the tip is um, the overt stuttering that you hear, but what's below the iceberg is really all of the internalized feelings like shame and embarrassment or regret that are really the ones that inhibit your access to like a good quality of life. So um, I do think a lot of the Eastern influences um, with my family, with not being open to sharing feelings, it did affect me a lot in terms of how I handled my own stuttering. And it's really interesting because I actually talked about my stuttering more with my friends before I started talking about it with my family. So I was out about stuttering with my friends before I was out about stuttering with my family, which kind of parallels how I was out about me being gay with my friends before I was out with my family. So I find I find that connection really interesting. And even now, even though I'm open to talk about stuttering with my mom and my dad, um, they both know I stutter now. It's still difficult for me to talk about feelings surrounding stuttering. They both know that I stutter, and I sometimes say like, "Oh, I stuttered a lot today," or "I didn't," but it's the conversation around feelings, which is still mostly absent, that I think is influenced from, being raised in a Filipino household with a lot of Eastern ideals. Um, yeah, so I just wanted to share my story and, just to see if just for other people to learn about um, the culture that's really different from Western culture. And hopefully sharing this you know, uh, may make some connections with people who might be dealing with a similar thing. So, um, yeah. And I believe that's all I have to share. So thank you for this space.
Thank you, Matt. That was really interesting, and I've worked with families who have a hard time understanding their children who stutter, and I'm glad that you can talk to them about it now. That's really good. You know, we have committee members to say things, but how about some of our other participants? You want to chime in on how culture and stuttering intersect? Matt, you have a question. Have you met others from the Philippines who stutter?
Yes, I have. Well, other Filipino Americans. So I don't think they were born in the Philippines, but they are Filipino. Yeah, I've met a couple, and I think I met them at this past conference. But before that, there weren't that many Filipinos that I could think of. Um, yeah.
Okay. And I'm sorry about that noise earlier. That was my dog knocking her food dish across the room by accident. And I wasn't muted, so sorry about that. That was me. So let's see, Alicia's not here. I know one of the things that we kind of jotted down in our notes is how sometimes differences in what can be more accepted in Western culture and Eastern culture can be more have more of a negative perception of pretty much anything that sort of singles somebody out and makes them different. I don't know if anyone has an experience like that or wants to talk about any aspect of culture and stuttering. We'll open it up to everybody.
I guess I can say something real quick. I certainly don't have the same perspective that Matt has. I was born in the US, but to be honest, other than Jeremiah and Ashley who are on the committee with me, I can't really say I've met too many Black people who stutter. I don't know if that's because I just haven't met them or what's going on with that, but kind of like during this discussion so far, I've been actually thinking about that the last couple of minutes. Like why is it that I have never really met any other Black people who stutter? And I'm just wondering if maybe that's potentially a cultural thing. I mean, fortunately for me, my family is very accepting of the fact that I stutter. Um, I grew up in a very accepting household, so there wasn't any issues with that. But I do know, just very generally speaking, sometimes in Black households, there isn't time to be dealing with people's issues. Like you kind of sweep personal issues under the rug just because it's a burden, and like there might be a perceived feeling within Black households that there's already so much stacked against Black people in general that why add another thing on top of that? again, that's just very generally, it's a very general statement, but it is something I have noticed in other Black households. Um, like I said, that's not the case for me, but I do know even like even people within my family who are cousins, um, it's a totally different dynamic between my household and theirs, where it's um, like you just don't talk about your problems, whether it be stuttering or depression or anxiety. You just don't do it because I guess the notion is that you just don't want to like why add another layer on top of what you're already going through in society. So I have been wondering if maybe the reason why I really haven't met that many other Black people who stutter is because they're trying to be covert and they're trying to do everything they can to mask their stutter because they don't want to impact their family negatively, or they just don't want to be perceived as a Black person in society who has another thing they have to deal with. But it's just an observation I had.
That's really interesting. And I've worked with many Black males and females who stutter. You know, living in Memphis, we're a very diverse population here. And I'm trying to think if I caught any of that sort of stigma vibe. And I don't remember that coming from my Black families. But, you know, there's probably, that's because we're seeing the ones that actually show up to the clinic. So that could be a biased group. And there's a whole other segment that says, we're not dealing with that right now. So there's a comment here, a well-attended workshop at the NSA conference called Stuttering While Black. Was anybody there? Anybody in this group at that?
Yeah, I was there. I was there.
I was there.
Tell us about that.
Sure. Hello, everybody. So my name is Jeremiah. So I just want to piggyback off what Ty was saying, how the Black culture, either you hide your stutter or like you don't bring it up though, because like there's more stuff on just like on the Black culture where it's like, okay, like we just have to like hide the way that we stutter, or like so like Ty, you had to answer your question and your thought. There are Black people out there that stutter, but we may all be covert stutterers, or we see like in the NSA or like in other places. Like so once like they do come out and say, hey, I am a person of the stutter. So like there is a community out there. It's just sometimes we may hide it because like we don't want other people to know, hey, I am a Black person who stutters. And then like for the past NSA conference, Stuttering While Black, it was great to see the different age groups of male and females who both stutter. Like we had like little kids speaking, then we had older gentlemen, and then like older ladies speaking about what it's like stuttering while Black. And it was very eye opening just to hear from the household experience as well. And yeah, Ty, I kind of agree with you. Just like each household is different as a person of color. Just like each household is different on the way if you do bring up your stutter, or if you don't bring up your stutter. So just like we really can't say, okay, like hey, like this is how other community is, because like everybody's different. So if that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Along those same lines of what Ty and Jeremiah were talking about, I feel like there's a Black ideal trope of Black women to be confident and relatable and funny. And while I am all of those things, you may not see that when I'm talking to you, and you get confused as I'm speaking, and somehow my confidence and the way I talk get jumbled up and mixed in in translation. When I was growing up, I I I I w- was almost a covert stutterer, I like to say, because it was blatantly obvious. But if I was asked about it, I didn't know how to really react. My mom always told me that I didn't have a stutter. I had a speech disfluency. And so that is what I would tell people. I don't understand what her tiff was with calling it a, 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 a stutter, but I almost projected that into my thoughts when people would ask me, why do you talk like 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 that, to the point where people thought I was was faking a stutter at like 10 years old, just because I didn't know how to react and 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 acknowledge to other people that I stuttered, and how to make them come 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 comfortable with how I was talking. I never felt the need to 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 do that. So yeah, I think Lindsay wanted to go. So
Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so as far as how for the cultures affected my view of stuttering, and how does it affect um, my family view. I grew up in a single parent home. My mom is Caucasian and my dad's African American, and I grew up with my mom. I have an older sister who's 8 years older than me. She doesn't stutter. And then I have a younger brother and sister on my dad's side who's 8 and 10 years younger than me. And it's a maternal genetics for me. It was my grandpa, my mom's dad, had a stutter. So I feel it was basically passed down from my mom's genetics. So basically, when I was growing up, I remember kind of watching like the camcorders and the videotapes back then, if you guys are familiar with camcorders, of me, playing in the sand, 5 years old, 4 years old, and a stutter. I had a stutter, but I wasn't aware that I had a stutter. So I would go through my repetitions or my blocks and be able to get through my sentences. I didn't look like I was defeated or upset. I was young. I wasn't aware of my speech at that point in time, and it wasn't necessarily talked about. My mom attempted to get me into speech therapy in elementary school. So that was pretty much the only formal of my therapies that I had. And she was more, since she was a single mom, she was more in the defensive mode of me, kind of like the protective mode. She would enable me in ways, as far as if she saw I was blocking, or if I asked her to order for me, she'd decide to do it. Which, when looking back, it kind of afforded me a harvest because it didn't allow me to accept the challenges. It allowed me to avoid even longer. My dad, everybody knew I stuttered. I was convert in a way, covert in a way of just being quiet and avoidant. When I talked, I had a stutter. So it wasn't anything that I would be able to hide. But as I got older and more skilled in my words and my vocabulary, then things started to get switched around or things of that nature to try to appear more fluent. Even now, there are times like my dad's on the East Coast, I'm in the Midwest, I'm in Missouri, and he's on the East Coast side. So I don't get to see him that often. But the times that I talk to him over the phone, I might be having, usually when I have conversations with him, I don't have a stutter. I'm calm, I'm relaxed. I don't feel like I'm put on the spot or any pressure, kind of exterior type forces that get me nervous into talking. So he never really experienced that. And there was a time in my life that I was going through a lot of different things, and my speech was, I had a more challenging way of getting out my speech, and I didn't hide it. I just let it out. And Dad was like, "Is everything okay with you, Lindsay?" And I was like, "Yeah, everything's fine. I'm just, well, it appears that you are beginning to do that a lot more, to stutter a lot more." It's like, "Yeah, Dad, it's just a bad day." So, for him to not realize kind of the extent of my stutter, kind of because it was never a topic that was necessarily talked about. So it kind of made me realize, well, maybe I need to stutter around him more often so he doesn't feel like something's wrong with me, that it's just the way I talk. So it was interesting to kind of see that. But there wasn't any discussion about it. So, and as I've gotten older, I've kind of had those more in-depth conversations about the way I feel about my stutter. I joined a program last year about like a 6-week program of like being able to sensitize yourself as far as going out in public and deciding to talk to different strangers and being able to stutter out loud. And that program I'd completed. It was a good experience. And I invited my dad and my younger sister and my brother and my stepmom to like the family gathering at the end to kind of say, I appreciate you guys being in my corner during this time frame. And I felt like whenever I was kind of exposing my feelings about how I had a stutter, that was probably the first time that my mom or my dad was able to see my heart, like my true heart and my true feelings and the weight that it's carried on me all these years. So I feel like as an adult now, being able to communicate with my family is a lot better for me and better for their understanding. But yeah, growing up, we didn't talk about it too much. So thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. I do find that it is kinder to the kids in the long run to let them speak for themselves, to not awfulize stuttering, to talk about it, acknowledge it. it's yeah, it's not, of course, not every family can handle that kind of advice, but I certainly try to get that across. Just love your child exactly the way they are, and what they have to say is more important than how they say it. All those sorts of messages, they're really important messages to get across.
So with that kind of that kind of outlook, Julie, at what point in time did you incorporate that into your therapy? I know you've been a pathologist for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Has that always been a part of your practice?
Yes. Now,
okay.
I do work directly with stuttering symptoms if that's what the person wants, but I don't force that on anybody. Well, let's just get you fluent, because that's just, well, for a lot of reasons, but you all know the reasons why we don't say that. But if somebody wants to work on how much tension they have, in their body or their throat or things like that, then we can work directly with physical attributes of stuttering. But there is a lot of quality of life, desensitization, being your authentic self, all those kinds of things that to me are more important. But I would never tell anybody that their personal goal isn't a good one. You just have to start where they are and go from there.
Yeah, because I feel like in my therapy, like the traditional school therapy that I experienced, it never addressed that portion of it, like the desensitization and
Mm-hmm.
taking your techniques outside the office.
Mm-hmm.
That was never incorporated. I even had mentioned that in my therapy sessions in like the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, like this all works well here with you individually, but when I go out there, it doesn't work.
Right.
So, how can we address that? And the lady wasn't able to address that at that point in time. That was back in the early 2000s. So, and it also depends on, if they are aware of stuttering or if that's their calling, their specific calling. But yeah, it can be a little bit more difficult to find people that address that aspect as well.
Very true. I think it's getting better. The more people attend continuing education and learn, most of the people in the field have that, well, not most. Well, I guess the majority of people in the field have that holistic viewpoint. Not everyone, but
yeah. I just want to piggyback off of that. I do think I'm an SLP in the schools right now, so I do think that there is an improvement in a lot of SLP's approach to stuttering therapy. How it shouldn't just be fluency based, but also also participation based and just overall quality of life based. But at the same time, there are instances where there's a new student on my caseload who stutters, and all I see on their IEP is just decreasing occurrences of stuttering. So, well, thankfully they got transferred to me so I could change that. But just like seeing that still exists in 2023 just kind of shows me that there's still a lot of work to be done in in SLP as a field in regards to stuttering therapy. Because I know for a lot of SLPs, especially within the school setting, stuttering is usually the area they're least comfortable treating, usually, from my experience. Um, so, and usually in grad programs, it's either just one course or it's like half a course in a grad program. Fluency, I mean. Um, and I and usually it doesn't really go over a lot about the internalized feelings when it comes to stuttering, but more about like the physical attributes of stuttering and fluency enhancing and stuttering modification techniques. Um, yeah, like those techniques alone don't really hold up to any chance to be generalized if we're not also addressing the emotional aspect. So, yeah. So, Julie, it's really great to meet you, like as another SLP who like gets it. So, yeah,
Nice to meet you too.
yeah,
And it's so much more fun to, I've had kids, so the way I approach it is we'll just lay out all the things they're experiencing, all the symptoms from the blocks to the not raising their hand to not talking to kids at lunch. And I'll let them pick, what's the one thing that you really want to work on. And half the time it is some kind of participation.
yeah,
That's important to them more so than, decreasing stuttering. So it's really fun just kind of going with where they're at.
yeah.
Okay. We went on a little tangent there, but that was really interesting. Anyone else have any therapy experiences that they want
I could share. I know Alicia's not here also, so I can talk a little bit also about what I remember her saying during our meetings. Um, I think in terms of my experience with stuttering, like one of the first things probably is like speaking another language, like in addition to English. I think one, I know that a lot of, or I don't know, maybe just in the speech pathologist community, sometimes there could be like there is a misconception, I think, that stuttering, could be exacerbated or could even be caused by, growing up with two languages or, some kind of, confusion between the two languages. And I feel like that's something that I definitely like noticed when I was younger. And then as I got older, I'm sorry, my dog is barking. As I got older, I definitely began to feel more insecure, just because I think to my own identity, obviously speaking Spanish is really important, and I think a lot of people just assume, and will speak to me in Spanish, and if I struggle to respond because I'm stuttering, then the immediate misconception might be that I don't speak Spanish. And then conversely, I think sometimes when I am, talking to people in English and I stutter, then they might think that I don't speak English, because I obviously look like, a Spanish speaker. So I think that's something that I've always like really struggled with. And, echoing like what other people have been saying about the speech pathologist community is that I don't really think, besides Dr. Medina, like I've never really met a Latina speech pathologist. All of my speech pathologists growing up were white. And obviously it's fantastic to hear Julie, like, talk about the importance of, having a multicultural perspective and bringing that to, your clients. But that's not something that I experience. And I think just even being able to like talk about my own experiences of, insecurity, would probably, would have been very valuable. And I think so the whole idea of language, I think, and bilingualism is really important to my own experience. And then I learned in college, I majored in Spanish and Portuguese, and I am going to Brazil next year. And I do speak Portuguese, obviously not as well as Spanish, but I am very nervous because I feel that when I'm speaking a language that is not my native language, like Portuguese, I get very nervous that people are going to just like assume that I can't speak the language, or, and I feel like to really learn a language, you obviously have to practice. And I feel like me struggling in Portuguese, people might think that, I can't speak Portuguese. I don't understand what they're saying, when that's like what I need to really become fluent. So language has always been a really big, important part of my experience. I feel like another important aspect has been I guess, I think within the Latinx community, stuttering is, I don't want to speak broadly, but at least my own experience has been that it is not completely understood. And it's definitely more of like a taboo subject. I even remember like watching actually a Mexican film where like one of the main jokes was that there was a character that had a stutter. So, and it was a pretty famous movie in Mexico. So I think, there definitely is like, there's not as much understanding of it as there is in the US. And I think that that's something that I definitely struggled with, because I don't really think that, I think it's something that was difficult, at least for my dad, to like understand. And he still doesn't really understand, I don't think. And I think even like, I remember like when we were in Mexico and we were like, bartering or whatever. And I was asking for something and I stuttered, and he was concerned, I think, that it would give the impression that, we weren't really Mexican, and that I, would have to pay more because they thought I was American or something. And I remember him like saying to the person like, "Oh, isn't it so funny that my daughter talks like that?" Like, trying to like, I don't know, like make a joke about it. But that's just kind of like the culture, I think. And so that's something that I definitely have experienced growing up. And I think, being able to talk about that and being able to hear other people who obviously those sorts of like cultural values really have shaped their experiences is important. And then another important part of my experience is that I have 3 sisters. So, and my twin has a stutter too. So I grew up, with someone else who has a stutter. And so when I was younger, for me, that was like normal way of speech, I think. But as we got older, I know that my parents, they definitely thought that it was caused, by the 4 of us sort of competing to talk, because people want to like tell the stories, people want to say what happened that day. And so we would all be competing with each other. And obviously, my twin and I would be stuttering. And so I think my parents thought that we were just so excited and competing with each other to talk that was why we were stuttering. And so even now, like it can definitely be hard because, you have to interrupt conversations, and it's hard to sometimes stop like the natural flow of conversations when everyone is talking. And if I want to like jump into a conversation, that could be more difficult. And so but that being said, I think also there has been a lot of value in having someone who shares my kind of exact experience with stuttering. And yeah, it's interesting. I think that's all I had to say, but yeah.
Thank you. That was so interesting. I've never thought about it from that perspective for the bilingual speaker who also stutters, that people would be doubting their language fluency because of stuttering. That's really interesting. And yeah, the whole, I think sometimes for some families too, the parents, there's guilt. They think they did something to cause it, and that kind of shapes their whole perception of it and can, really influence how they deal with it, I guess would be the words. Who else? Got a few minutes left. We're gonna start to wrap up, but let's just take a minute and see who else might want to discuss anything about their culture, their growing up, their family beliefs.
I'll just say one last quick thing. Like Gabriella said about having somebody like her twin stutter, so kind of growing up knowing that stuttering is a normal thing, like that's her normal. I know for me personally, like my friend Ariel is in this webinar right now. My best friend Ariel, actually, we were neighbors growing up, and she stutters. And before I stuttered, because my stutter developed later in life, more around middle school, but I grew up seeing and hearing her stutter. And so for me and my family, we knew she stuttered. So stuttering was not anything that was unusual for me, because she was my best friend, is my best friend still. And I knew she stuttered, and that was just the way it was. Like that was normal for me. And so I feel like because of that, when I developed my stutter, it allowed me to accept it, I would say, at a pretty rapid pace, just because I had known somebody who stuttered for so long already, that for me it was like, okay, well, this is what it is now for me. But it wasn't scary for me because I already knew somebody who stuttered and had been dealing with it for pretty much their entire life. So I'm pretty grateful for that, to have been able to grow up in my formative years with somebody who stuttered, so that when I stuttered myself and when I encounter other people who stutter, it's not anything that's abnormal to me, because that has pretty much been my normal ever since I was a young kid.
Really nice that you had that friend, that ally. Cool. So we can open it up to questions now. If anybody wants to ask, we'll try to answer best we can. If you want to put them in the chat, that's fine, or speak up.
Yeah, I have a question about.
Okay.
Hello, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. For like all the different cultures and stuff here, my question is, how did like your parents like accept you going to the NSA conference? If that makes sense, because for me, I went back in 2020, and I snuck out down to Texas, and that didn't go too well. So I snuck out because I didn't think I had the support of my family. But at the last conference down in Fort Lauderdale, they came to my open mic. So just like, my question was just like, how did you guys like, guardians, your parents like accept your stay and say, hey, yeah, I'm going to spend like a lot of money to go to the student convention?
Good question.
Oh, sorry.
No, you can go ahead.
Well, I'm just gonna say that, like, I totally agree. Like, basically, even now, like, every time we've gone, my parents or my mom has said, sure, it's really worth all that money, like, and I'm just like, yeah, I know that I'm paying a lot, but it's worth it to me. And even the first year that I ever went to a conference, like even till the week before, because this is when I was still in high school, my mom was like, I don't know if we should go. Like, they're really expensive. Like, are you sure you really want to try to go? It's like, I mean, at this point, I'd never been, so I didn't really, but I was like, I honestly do. And I was excited for a vacation. So, but yeah, I totally understand. And sort of seems like a lot of money to spend for like 4 or 5 days. But yeah.
Thank you. And Ashley, you had something to add?
Yeah, I was gonna add along those same lines of going to conference. My mom is surprisingly one of the biggest supporters of me going to conference. There will be some years where I'm like, like I am I am a a college student. I need to be, saving money. Look, she's like, but the NSA conference, you have to go to that. You're gonna go. You're gonna go. And her always just trying to su 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 support me from all angles is honestly really helpful. A lot of times when sometimes you don't feel like your 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 culture understands you and just a base of a support system I feel is really important. Just somebody you can like feel safe with talking about your feelings that 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 day. Whenever I was younger, there were multiple instances of people just like saying like really horrible, rude things to me. And I, 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 I knew it was from a place of ignorance, and I like understood that, but it just always felt never ending. Like, okay, you educate this one person, but you're never gonna see them again. You're gonna have to. This is not gonna stop anytime soon. And just like dealing with those uh uh emotions, like this isn't a temporary type of thing. This is probably going to happen again. And mm, it, especially from people in the medical field, I've realized has been especially just like a true ignorance. I was was stuttering when I went to go visit my 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 cousin in the hospital, and the first door when you walk in, I had actually walked into the wrong door and didn't know where I was going. She was in another part of the hospital, but the door that I had walked into, I was like just asking um, where that part of the hospital would be, and I I I close my eyes when I stutter. So sometimes I open my eyes to completely like new scenes of people have moved and I don't know what's going on. And this as I'm stuttering. This woman is like yelling and screaming in my face, thinking I'm like, I don't know, like on drugs or something. And she's like screaming at me like, hey, hey. I had walked into the emergency room entrance, and she was like, are you okay? And I'm like, like, yeah, like looking around, like, yeah, like I'm fine. I just like just knowing that these experiences are coming from other people's ignorance about stuttering in a in a field where you are supposed to be not knowledgeable of the the human body and the various things that that happen with it. But yeah, just a long story of having a support this system in my mind is always one of the just most helpful things, honestly.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. We could probably do a whole evening of disappointing experiences in dealing with society and people that you think would know better. Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question or make a comment before we wind it up? Really glad we had some people in attendance. Thank you so much. And you'll be hearing more from us. We have another one of these sessions coming up in March, which will probably be here before we know it. And yeah, and reach out to the committee if there are things that you want us to know or questions that you have. They do that just through, they've got emails, I guess. They have Lindsay's email.
I don't think that is posted, but I know that there's other ways to get a hold of people within the NSA if they have something they want to be able to ask us.
Great. Well, everybody have a good evening.